too. Who are you talking to? Good evening, I'm Bruce and I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is 8/4/09, and that computes to 16 years. My buddy Ralph, my sponsor Ralph, says, you know, just because you have a few years sobriety, Bruce, doesn't make you any better, doesn't make you any smarter, doesn't make you special, just makes you harder to correct. And I remembered that. I grew up in a family that there was no alcohol ever. And we went to church every Sunday. We did all this. I went to a Christian college in Chicago called North Park University. And in that first week, the other older guy said, hey, the Freestone Bar is right up the street and you don't need ID to get in. And guess what? I went in there and you could drink, and I had my first drinks there. And sometime the phone would ring and the guy would say, anybody without ID out the back door. And that's how my drinking started. And it kind of was just not big. And probably the first sign of the fact that I was an alcoholic was I was getting married. Carol and I got married. And on the honeymoon, I bought 2 bottles of champagne. She looked at me and said, Bruce, why did you buy 2 bottles of champagne? I don't drink. And anyway, we moved to Seattle and we were doing good. And I was working for my dad and we were just we go to church, we do some work. And then all of a sudden, I started to, in my profession, I started to work with some other people, and we started to go to Vito's. And at Vito's, we had the family table every Friday, and I met Louis Martini there and started taking pictures for him, and we started drinking. I had a friend, Larry Nelson from KOMO, and he at 6:30 in the morning say, Larry, Bruce, where are we going today? Daniels, where are we going today? And that just became our pattern. And Larry was on his 3rd wife then. I was still with Carol. And and they said to us at one party, they said, you guys, we got to limit you to 2 glasses of wine. You're just out of control. So Larry solved the problem and went out and bought bigger glasses. And then we were having a party and we were making sure that we were taking all the empties out to Larry's trunk during the day. And was at my house. And at the end of the evening, Carol said, you guys did pretty good. You didn't drink too much tonight. And then Carrie, my youngest daughter, comes out and says, hey, Mom, she has a Easter basket. Look at my new cork collection. And then, you know, it was hard to go home. The fights were starting. It was hard to come home. And on a Sunday morning, Carrie would go around the family room and sniffing and say, Mom, Dad has that smelly stuff in his coffee again. And our marriage was just, and it was not fun to go home. There was one night I was at Vito's restaurant with Vito and Gasparetti and Rosalini, and in walks Carol. And she starts saying, why are you here tonight? It's a school night. You should be home. And alcohol's taking away my husband. Alcohol's taking away the father of my children. And here you on a school night drinking. And I stood up and said, Carol, you can do this to me at home, but you can't do it in front of my friends. And I went home to my house and I packed a suitcase and told my 3 daughters, I'll be back someday. That night I chose alcohol over my family. And things, Larry and I, we kept drinking, and Larry ended up in Harborview, and I brought in some Chardonnay, and I had my first heart attack, and Larry brought in some Louis Martini, and that's just how we lived. And we believed we were good alcoholics. And Larry passed away, and I started drinking at home instead of out. And that just escalated. And there's one time where I didn't feel very good, so I drove to Northwest Hospital and I fell on the floor in the ER, and they went right into my heart, thinking I was having another heart attack, but I wasn't. And the next morning, I'm laying in bed there, and the doctor comes in, and my daughter Janine's there, and he says, Bruce, how much do you drink a day? I said, oh, 5 or 6 bottles of wine. He said, you'd be dead. And Janine yelled at him and said, he's telling you the truth. And the doctor just said he'd be dead and walked out the door. And I kept drinking, and that was just, we were, I was divorced, and one morning I was all by myself, and I woke up on the floor of my house, and I was dressed for work. And I got to my studio, and I came walking in, and they said, boss, you're late. You've never been late. And I said, well, I kind of passed out this morning. They told me you need to go to the hospital. You need to go to a doctor. So I said, okay. Walked out of the studio, went to the restaurant next door and had a double margarita. Got in my Suburban, I drove home. And as I got out of my Suburban, I fell flat on my face. My glasses are broken. My face is bleeding. My hands are bleeding. My knees are bleeding. My mind said, Bruce, you need a drink. And I went out and I poured a pounder of a 16-ounce glass full of Chardonnay and drank that. And I think I was going to get the second glass. And the last thing I remember about that morning is my neighbor asking the medics if I was still alive. When I kind of came to at Northwest Hospital, I was tied into a hoop like this, a round hoop. And they were trying to get me, my alcohol level was 3.2 at 10 in the morning. And every hour they would take me out of that hoop, and they would take me in and give me a TC scan because my brain was bleeding. And the only reason I'm here today is I was on Plavix and my blood would not clot. I was in the ER 21 days when my kids came in to the hospital, land there, and Lauren has this letter signed by all these people here. Say, Dad, you have 2 choices. Stop drinking or die. And I said, I'll try to stop drinking, but I don't have a clue how to not drink. And so they sent me to Highline Hospital for treatment. And because my brain was still bleeding, but the second day, a doctor says, Bruce, will you come into my office? And I get in his office and I sit down, and he said, Bruce, you're an alcoholic. And alcoholism is a fatal progressive disease, and there is no cure. But there is a solution, and that's called Alcoholics Anonymous. After 4 heart attacks and all that stuff, it's the first time a doctor told me that alcoholism was a fatal progressive disease. And he told me to go to AA. And I thought, okay, I'll go to AA. And I know that my buddy Ralph, I took his sales training course, and I called him up and say, hey, Ralph, I told I'm an alcoholic and I need to go to AA. Well, can you be my sponsor? And he said, not quite that easy, Bruce. Why don't you come down to my office and we'll talk about it? Okay. So the guy I've known since I was 22. I'm now 60 something. But I walk in his office and he says, well, Bruce, you're coming to AA. Are you willing to make your sobriety the number one thing in your life? The most important thing in your life? Are you willing to make your sobriety number one? And I said, yes. And then he said, well, you got to realize, Bruce, because you're a little grandiose sometime, that this is my best friend. He said, it's when you come to AA, Bruce, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what you own. It doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter anything. And you can relate to this because it's just like when you're laying in Swedish hospital and all you have on you is a wristband that says you're Bruce Johnson. That's the way you come to AA. Then he said, and then you're going to maybe have to do some work. And I said, what does that mean? And he says, well, we are taking a river raft number 7 or whatever it is. The guy gets you together at the start and he says, in case of a capsize, you're going to be an active participant in your rescue. And then he loaded on me and said, Bruce, you're not going to graduate. And I thought that meant I was always going to be an alcoholic my whole life. And we started in, and after about 4 months, I came up to Ralph and I said, this isn't working. I haven't been rocketed, and the promises haven't come true. And he says, well, the promises, Bruce, you should read them because the last sentence says, these will materialize if you work for them. So I got a sponsee, and the sponsee was a young man, and he went to, he was going to Hawaii for his birthday, and he called me and he said, Bruce, I drank on my birthday last night. And I told Lauren, my daughter, I'd failed. And she said, Dad, you didn't fail, you stayed sober. And that was my first big thing that I stayed sober working with another alcoholic. And then I started to get some service positions, but there was one night I was driving the Empire Way. And I was going along Massachusetts Street, and there's 5 inches of snow. And there's 3 guys walking along. And I drove right by them and said, what are those dumb guys doing out here? And so I get to Empire Way, I have cookies for 200 people, and we're 20. And we start the meeting, and about 15 minutes of the meeting, these 3 guys come walking through the door. And I said, I went up to them at break and said, I drove right past you guys. Where are you from? And this big guy says, we're from the Salvation Army, and I have 37 days sober, and I could go to an AA meeting, so I walked here. And I said, great. And then he said, will you give us a ride home? Supposed to say yes. So I said yes, and I take him home. It was on 4th Avenue, then the ARC, and get out, and this guy says, well, you pick us up next week. And I said, yeah, I'll see you on Wednesday. He says, Bruce, there's a meeting on Monday, too. So I said, okay, I'll see you Monday. And this guy, he's about 6'12", he's a big guy. And I picked him up I say, I'll pick you up on Monday. And I pull up on Monday and we start to go to Empire Way. He says, where's the cookies? I said, we only have cookies on Wednesday night. And he says, don't they bake cookies on Mondays too, Bruce? And in the Salvation Army, you have to be on the 5th step by your 5th month. So I had my first sponsees and we started going through the steps. And I realized that I had a purpose. And working with other alcoholics, and pretty soon there was 12 guys in my Suburban, and pretty soon the Salvation Army bus came, and here we had people that come off the street, and my purpose was good. It was good. And then I did the 4th step and the 5th step. And at the end of the 5th step, Ruff took my thing and he threw it in the wastebasket. He said, Bruce, all that now is behind you. You have a chance to restart your life. All that's gone in the wake. And I had a chance to restart my life at the age of 63. And I decided when I did that, he also told me to go into jail and I do meetings. And in jail, my theme was I had a chance to restart my life and you can too. And there was one night in jail that we had 4 guys in there, 3 were young, 1 was old. And this old guy says, guys, I want you to listen to me. You don't like me very much. I wake up in the middle of the night screaming. And I do that because I see that family of 4 I ran over. He's telling you, you have a chance to restart your life. He says, I don't have that chance because tomorrow I'm going to prison for the rest of my life. 2 years later, at Empire Way, this guy comes up to me and says, hi, Bruce. 2 years ago, you told me I had a chance to restart my life. And here I am with 3 years sober and I've restarted. And you have that choice too. You can restart your life. What's really nice is we have a little Anna. She says, why do we have an alcoholic birthday for Papa? He doesn't drink. And, I have and then the girls, we made amends to them. I made amends to them and they forgave me. And, they talked about when they moved in with me that it was fun when the drinking was social. And then when it became a little more than social, and when it became every day, it was no fun anymore. So that's what they told me. And then there was one time when Lauren came up to me and said, somebody in this family has to be the adult, and I nominate you, Dad. I says, what does that mean? He says, you're going to put this family back together. I said, well, what do I have to do that? I said, well, you have to maybe go make some real amends to Mom this time. Just don't thank her for being, there when you weren't. And so I called up Carol and I said to her, I'd like to take you to lunch. And we went to a restaurant, we got in the back and we laughed, and we cried for 2 hours. Carol's a nurse at Harborview, and she looked at me and she said, Bruce, I never thought you could stay sober. How did you manage? How are you managing to stay sober? And I said, I'm managing to stay sober by working with other alcoholics. And you know what was the big thing about this program is, none of you said you should to me. What you said is, this is what we did. And why don't you become part of we? And we'll do it together. And that's been my story. I had a chance to restart my life. And I also had a chance to find a God that loved me. You know, the God of my church, I was going to hell for sure. I think in our church, we couldn't even rub our eyes when we took our contacts out because it felt good. Well, we were going to go, you know, if we danced, if we smoked, if we did this, we're going to go to hell. And I had to find a God that, and it was at Bishop Blanchett High School's graduation. One of my friends, he was the girls' basketball coach. He was the speaker, and he said to the kids, he said, I'm here to tell you tonight, as you restart your life, I'd like you to find your own God. He says, what that means by that is I grew up in a Catholic family. I went to a Catholic university. I'm a Catholic school teacher. And they sent me to Vietnam. They gave me a gun and told me to kill people. And then people were trying to kill me. And I'm laying there in the hospital, wounded. And he says, God, where are you? Where are you? And he said, I realized I didn't have my own God. I had my Pope's God, and I needed to find my own God that is with me. And I realized I didn't have to earn that was there. I had to accept God's love and God's. And so that's what I'm telling you. And when I heard that speech, I had 3 months sober. I had a chance to find a higher power that loves me and takes care of me and is there. And every day I start when Rob said I wasn't going to graduate, that means as we get to step 12, we practice these principles in all our affairs. And that means every morning I ask God to show me God's will for me and the power to carry that out. And if I'm going to do that, I need to ask God every morning to remove my defects, remove my shortcomings, and then be willing to make amends. But most of all, be an instrument of God's love. And the great thing I have learned is in AA is just to pause and do I really need to answer that question? And if I do need to answer the question you asked me, can I answer it with love? I had a chance to restart my life, and you do too. And to quote Mr. Ralph, we are the luckiest people in the whole world.
That's right.